Hello everyone, and how are you guys today? Well, I got a fro going on, but anyway, we are here to talk about astrology this week. It is going to be a two-part video. I'm going to be talking about both aspects and aspect patterns. Now there are to explain why they're going to be two different videos. Aspects is about lines, and then patterns is what is the shapes that the lines make up. And this is very important because, as we talk about, as I had mentioned in the last video, knowing how the planets, the zodiac sign, and the houses mean is all great. But in order to figure out how that makes you one whole person, you have to figure out how those interact with each other, and that's what an aspect is. So that is what we're going to be starting today's video on. Ta-da! Aspects, the lines of interaction, literally. So the way I like to think about aspects here, as I also mentioned in the other video, we can thank the Egyptians for hieroglyphics and coming up with symbols to match words. So each of these is a glyph of what, or like a symbol of what each aspect is. And as I will talk about later in the video, there are major aspects and minor aspects, but I will break those down further in the video. But to quickly start off, what is an aspect exactly? Well, the way I like to think about it is you have two planets going around in the universe, in our solar system to be exact, and these planets, depending on how far apart or close together they are able to interact with each other, or not if they are too far apart from each other. And you're probably just like, well, how do we know when they're too far apart from each other that they're not interacting? Well, I did not include this in the slide, but we call those orbs, and orbs is like a bubble. You know how everyone says they have their personal bubble, and depending on how big your bubble is how far you're allowing your boundary. Your bubble could be this small or your bubble could be this big. It doesn't matter. It depends how much you want to let people into your energy and in your area. Well, that's exactly what planets do. So if you have a big orb field, then therefore that means you're able to interact more because you have a much bigger playing field for planets to interact with you. However, if you have like a really small orb, then therefore you have to be like really close to each other to interact with each other. And typically an orb can be described as degrees, because aspects and everything in astrology is about degrees, because we are on a circle and there's 360 degrees in a circle. So therefore that's why each aspect has a degree to it, because it's breaking up 360 into different parts. And also what's important is that typically astronomers, but already when you calculate it on a website, they already take the orbs into account, is 8 to 10 degrees. That's how far the orb boundary is of every planet. Some planets it might be more smaller, like for minor aspects, because minor versus major, if you think about it, minor means less significant, so therefore they need much more tighter orbs to be looked at. So, as I said, they are invisible interactions in the chart, and however, even though they are invisible, we physically manifest them in our everyday life. So therefore, when you're looking at your birth chart, if you want to know why you act a certain way, you can look at your natal chart, and it will tell you the permanent energies that the planets were interacting at when you were born, and this is why the way you are. And they change every day, as I will talk about in another video where we continue to talk about transits, which is planets moving at current today, because as I said, your natal chart is a snapshot of when you were born, but the planets are still moving, so that's why you're being affected every single day. And those aspects, from the transiting planets to the planets in your natal chart, also affect how you interact and feel. Because maybe, for example, just to show you, like your moon could be in one sign, but then today it's in a currently different sign. So is it interacting with its natal moon or is it not? And if it's not, then you're not feeling any type of energy to your natal moon. But just today you might have like a temporary mood, like, I'm feeling bad today because the moon today is just not feeling well. But it would have a more significant impact on you emotionally if it was affecting your natal moon. So that's a little bit about transits and why aspects are very important. So how do you see aspects in the birth chart, right? Well, as you see right here, these lines, allergies, these lines right here show the interactions. You could basically, as I said, visualize this as gravity, but you can't see gravity, so think about reaching out and holding hands. If you can't touch each other, then you can't form an aspect, but if you're able to touch each other, then you're forming an aspect. Degrees of orbs. And depending on the type of website you use, specifically this picture has some of the colors changed from what I typically use, but really it doesn't matter what website you're using as long as you know what the color schemes are. Really, if you know their placements, you can kind of guess how far apart they are and figure out that way, but also looking at the chart will tell you too. But in this picture, what stays common though is red aspects are very challenging because red stands out a lot, so therefore red aspects are negative. In this picture, the positive aspects like go, think about it like a traffic light. The green means go, it's a good, positive, interactive aspect. However, in some charts it might be blue because blue and red are complementary to each other in a sense. So are red and green. Hey, we're getting close to Christmas. I'm sorry, I skipped over Thanksgiving. And then in this picture right here, what tripped me up, is that the aspects that are minor, because sometimes minor aspects are shown, here, the minor aspects are in pink, and then typically on the website I use, the minor aspects are green. So you can see why they use green for soft, harmonious aspects. Could throw me off a bit, but I was able to see the big pattern, which is that triangle, which I will share in the next video of what that means. So, as I said, aspects is all about geometry, and I will show you how they grow and increase throughout the birth chart. So you can, just quickly show, 0 can also represent 360 because you made a complete cycle, so therefore you're starting from the beginning again. And then if you divide 360 in half, literally, as you will see, you get 180. And then if you divide the 180 in half, as you see right here, you get 90 degrees. And so forth. And just to say quickly, if you divide 90 degrees then in a half again, you get 45, 35 degree angle. So that's just to quickly, I'm not really going to break down the geometry and math behind this, just know it's all about division and how you divide up the circle depends on what type of aspect you get. So there are your major aspects, which is your conjunction, opposition, sextile, square, and trine. I am not going to have them in order in this video in these groups. However, I'm going to be having them grouping in order from increasing from 0 to 180. So your major aspects, major means they have the most influence on your personality and also the most important part of you, because this is what makes you act every day. So if it's pretty major, then this is something significant. And then you have your minor aspects, which is your semi-sextile, your quincunx, your semi-square, and your quintile. And minor, which is opposite of your major. The minor is like the more mundane, everyday life activities that you, like the little milestones you would accomplish every day to help your big accomplishments in life is what these minor aspects are. So if you want to think about it, major aspects is the beach. And then when you look at the individual grains of sand, those are your minor aspects. I hope that visualized the importance and severity that these aspects hold on each other. But don't get me wrong, those little grains, as you see, make up big piles of islands, so it can really build up. So as I talked about, there are two types of aspects besides the major and minor aspects, which is already two types. So the two types can be grouped into two other types, which is your negative and positive, because in astrology there's duality. It's the same thing with the elements. Fire, water, that's a duality. Earth, air, that's a duality. But also they have complementary to each other. So fire and air are complementary to each other, that's a duality. And then water and air water and earth are complementary to each other, so that's another duality. So in here we have a duality of negative and positive. And it's not the negative and positive that you're thinking of. Negative is not negative whatsoever. And positive can be a negative too, because too much of something can be a bad thing. So here are your positive aspects, your harmonious aspects. You have your trine, sextile, semi-sextile, and quintile. I feel like I'm naming countertops of all these tiles. So these are your positive aspects, and positive means they're easy, they flow, they're able to get along with each other. But because they get along with each other, that doesn't mean necessarily that that's a good thing, because if you're too comfortable, you can get stuck in that and maybe you just don't move forward. And then you have your challenging aspects, or your negative aspects, and that's your opposition, square, semi-square, sesquiquadrate. They call it a sesquare for short, it's better that way. And then a quincunx, or an inconjunct, which is something we'll talk about later. And what's so negative about these is that they cause challenges, and who likes to be challenged? Because challenges make you feel uncomfortable, but this uncomfortable is needed to grow and develop. So they're not really bad, because nothing in astrology or anything in life is to hurt you. Everything is for you to learn a lesson. Everything is for you to grow. And really, if you don't take the opportunity to, depending on if this challenging aspect is a major or minor, it will affect how you grow and develop throughout life, because you got to take challenges sometimes, and if you're afraid to take challenges, then how are you going to grow? So to begin, first off, before I talk about each of these aspects, I did say I'm going to be having them increasing. So I will flip through like a flip book to show you visually how these aspects are growing. So we start at our conjunction, which is the very start, the 0 degrees, and then we're going to end at 180, because that's the end. Because after 180, all you're doing is doing the same thing backwards. So here's a flip through of the aspects growing. And then go back this way. Boom. And there we go. That's how the aspects work, and literally depending on where they are in your chart, I know in these pictures they're in specific locations, but that's just to give you a visual. It can look like that anywhere on the chart. This is just showing you how far apart they are on the chart. It's like a location. So if you want to know how far apart you are from each other, you're able to look at the degrees, because every zodiac sign and house only goes up to 29 degrees. So you're not going to see, oh yeah, this planet is at 10 degrees and this planet is at 150 degrees. No, it's not going to tell you that. So you have to know based off of where they are in the chart if they're 150 degrees apart from each other or not. So a conjunction, and as you saw earlier, I had stars next to a conjunction, and that is because a conjunction is the only aspect that is neutral. And why is it neutral? Because it can be both negative and positive, and you're about to find out why. So this is when think of like a pancake. This is when two planets are like this to each other. Or sometimes they might look like this to each other depending on how their orb of separation is. They could be like this and it's still a conjunction because its energy is still able to hit off of each other. And this is a bad thing. Or a good thing depending on what planets are interacting with each other. Because some planets are really powerful in their energies and some other planets are really passive in their energy. And if you put passive and aggressive together, you get like a passive aggressive nature. And it can also be inconsistent because is the strong aggressive side going to dominate today, or are you feeling assertive today and feeling like you want to be more passive in your approach? And that all depends on your transits going on today, depending on which side is going to show itself that day. But the problem of this is having two planets together is that they're basically one. And if you're one, how do I tell which one is which? How do I know which one's the passive planet and which one's the aggressive planet? You're both like this to each other. Your energies were like this, but now you're like this. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know who's who. And that's the problem. Because if you're not able to tell the energies apart from each other, then you're not able to use it more directly or use it in a useful way, because it's just confusion. You're like trying to muddle through a puzzle in a sense. And because of this, it's obvious to other people that you have two types of energies, but it's not obvious to you because it's just what you think it's supposed to be. But really, okay, it's like taking like a side. Two planets have two different viewpoints. Okay, we're going to choose we're going to choose the moon and the sun. So the moon is all about the emotions and the sun is all about the ego and the image. So putting them together, you're going to be very emotional about your image, but are you too overly emotional about your image? Do you just not care about your image? Do you sporadically show your image like, oh, I want to be like this one day, and then like one day you're just like dark and gloomy and you're just like, yeah, this is my image today. Or it's inconsistent, and that's the problem with an inconjunction, is that the energies are so merged together, it's just one big blob. And then we have a semi-sextile, which is almost like a conjunction, because now 30 degrees, this is a full zodiac apart from each other. So instead of being like this to each other, they're now more like this to each other. And yes, they're able to interact with each other, but they're more separate. They're able to have two separate identities from each other, and you're able to interact and tell which one is which. You're able to tell, oh, this is my sun. Oh, this is my moon. Oh, this is how I feel. Oh, this is how I show off myself. But together, they're able to interact with each other in a more positive way. Because a sextile means that the zodiac signs that they're in are right next to each other. So they still share some common ideas and common goals. So therefore the two planets are able to still get along with each other. It's just they're not overriding each other and trying to fight each other for dominance. They both can just flow easily and just respect one another. And then we move on to a semi-square, which is almost two zodiacs apart from each other, which would be a sextile. But here in a semi-square, well, to be exact, a square is a challenging aspect, and a semi-square is half of that. So it's a challenging aspect, but even more challenging. The energy is more tightly together because we're only 45 degrees. So we're not 90 degrees, so it's not like we're like this to each other, we're like this. So therefore we're able to touch this much easily than we are to touch it from here. And because of that, this energy is able to show itself more than a square, as you will see later on. So this type of challenge, when you take it on, you're not afraid to take it on because you're just like, I can still see how we can get through this problem. Because remember, we're still in similar zodiac signs, so we're just one zodiac apart from each other. We still share the common goals. Even though we're having a challenge because we might not see eye to eye, I'm able to see past that, basically. I'm able to grow past whatever we're not able to see clearly on, and I'm able to see what we can see clearly on and work with that. You know, it's basically learning how to accommodate, basically. That's what a semi-square is. The ability to accommodate in a situation and ability to give instead of being so intense. And this is very important because if you take on the challenge that this aspect has, it will significantly show in your life, because it's like if you think this is a weird example, but if you think of a rose and then has like its last little leaf petal and then it just plops off and then falls to the ground, that's basically what overcoming a semi-square is. That's just one less stress in my life. A sextile, we're back to good, more energy. A sextile, now we're 60 degrees apart, and as I said, a zodiac sign is 30 degrees, so now we're 2 zodiacs apart from each other. As you see, we're getting farther and farther apart from each other. Therefore, the energies are getting less and less more intense, because this is so intense. But the farther you get away, it's like less and less intense. But its intensity can hit in a different way. That's why you're still aspecting each other and able to connect. So in a sextile, this is also another weird example, but sex, you're exchanging energies and you're enjoying the exchange of energies, but you're also creating something in the process, because you're able to produce and manifest things. And as they say, reaching your climax in that type of sense is like the closest thing to reaching like the heavens and spiritual energy. So thinking about that with a sextile, these are planets that really get along with each other, like so get along that they're able to manifest their energies. They're just like, hey, but that's what a semi-sextile is, because as I said, it's just a semi-sextile is like a conjunction, but they're separate energies instead of one. Here in a sextile, yeah, we're definitely 2 different energies, but we're energies that like each other and get along. So hey, let's produce something, you know, let's create something together. I like you, you like me, and this is where we get talents, because you share talents, because you manifest energies from within yourself that are your natural talent abilities to show out to the world. And depending on what is aspecting this sextile, a sextile can both be good in sharing energies, like sharing and manifesting, but it can also be a roadblock, because you could not manifest it. You could overly manifest it, and therefore it's not like taken away, but it's like abused, or you cannot manifest it at all, and it kind of just like goes in the wayside, because it's just so harmonious. It's just like it's like waiting talent just to pick up and grab for you. And then we have a quintile. We're still 2 zodiacs apart from each other, but now we're 72 degrees, which means we're almost at a problem, but we're not quite at a problem. And this is why we're able to get along with each other, because the 2 planets are able to see that they're going to have a problem with each other, so they're able to stop it before they have that problem. So they're just, I know that basically sounds like a semi-square, because a semi-square was you have a problem, but you're able to overcome the problem because you guys like each other. While a quintile is you're able to stop a problem from happening because you want to get along with each other. But this is different because it's how you want to show off your style. So it can be challenging to overcome problems, but also it's a good thing. So what do you want to benefit from overcoming this challenge? For like example, this is probably a weird example, but a quintile, you know, for like your image, you want to be like a really great student. So therefore, you get good grades so that way you look like a good student. So therefore you're just like, oh, I overcame this hard challenge because I wanted to look good. And I have the work to show off for it. I showed that I put the energy into it and I'm a good student. And therefore, I am now reaping the benefits of the challenge I overcame because I'm now able to show off, yeah, I'm educated in a sense. So that basically like shows you, yeah, I know that was a really weird example. But that's what I think about when it comes to school, because school, really, spiritualism and trying to search for information really makes you think about what's greater and beyond you and how you can reach those. Because it can be challenging to reach places that are beyond you, but you have all the abilities in you. You have all the abilities in you. It's just, are you able to use those abilities correctly? Because a quintile is also a minor aspect, so it's kind of like hidden and only tapped into if you consciously tap into it. So then we have a square, and a square is a really hard aspect because these two planets cannot get along with each other. And because they can't get along with each other, they just can't figure out how to even interact with each other. So it's almost like a standstill. It's like I'm looking at you like I don't know how to help you, and you looking at me like I don't know how to help you. So we're like at a standstill, like, all right, so how are we going to do this then if we can't get along? And there's just like, I don't know. So it's just, and we're stuck here. So it's like we're staring at each other for like infinity, like what are we going to do about this? That's why we have other aspects to help with these challenges, as we'll see in aspect patterns, to release this type of energy, because this stuff can build up in you and be stresses in your life, and stress is not good. So, and because this is such a strong, this is like a strong, I can't enforce how strong this is. If you think about fault lines and earthquakes and how tectonic plates are, you have a fault line, so it's like two plates rubbing up against each other, but one of them's got to give, and when it gives, it's an earthquake. In this case, when this challenge, it just gets too much and builds up, it explodes violently and erratically. So it's just like somebody exploding one day. It's just like, a person that's always calm, and then suddenly they're just like, boom, it's like a ticking time bomb, and now they've exploded. You're just like, whoa, where did all this energy come from? Built up energy that they didn't have anywhere to release it. They didn't know how to deal with it. So now it's like something triggers and it's just like blah. That's a very hard problem, and that's something that needs to overcome. And this does, and if you overcome it, it's like such a major relief. It's like a challenge you won't ever make again, because you know what it's like to be in that kind of energy, and you're just like, I've overcome it and I know how not to fall back into the trap. Here we have a trine, which is 120 degrees, and as you see here, we are now 1, 2, 3, 4 zodiac signs away from each other. And by 4, we're back, because there's 4 elements. So therefore, we're back again at the same element, which is why they're harmonious to each other. Because a trine is between two planets that are in the same element. Even though they're in different zodiac signs, there are 3 elements for every zodiac sign. Because there's 4 quadrants. The zodiac sign is broken up into 4. So each 4 has 3 in it. Each 4 sections have 3 zodiac signs in it. So therefore, this was one zodiac sign. This was the end of the other element zodiac sign. So that when you get here, you're back to the same element, even though it's different zodiac sign. And this is similar. I know this is it all starts sounding the same the more you talk about it. But how a trine is different from a sextile is that instead of exchanging energies in a really, really lovely way, these 2 planets are exchanging energies with each other but it's for fun because we get along with each other. We can still create with each other, but we don't have to if we don't want to. We just get along. It's kind of like a note. It's just like, hey, if you want another talent, it's right here. You can work with it if you want to. Even though this is a major aspect, and a sextile is also a major aspect, but a trine is more like a passive talent than a proactive talent like a sextile. So a trine is, and trines can be lazy talents. They're talents that you don't put the energy into because they're just so easy. You're just like, yeah, this is my natural talent. I really don't have to grow it. Where a sextile, you're just like, yeah, this is my natural talent. I had to put some effort into it, and therefore I appreciate it more. A trine is just like a talent you basically use however you want to because it's just like a natural gift. Like if somebody has the natural gift to talk or speak to people, it's not hard for them to give a presentation to a camera because they're just like, oh, I could do that with my eyes closed. And that can be a problem because it's so easy. They're just like, yeah, I'm just going to be a spokesperson. Okay, well, what other talents do you have other than being like a spokesperson? You could do something different. You have this talent right here you could do, but you just choose not to use it because another talent just might be easier to express than this one. So therefore you can get stuck because you're just like, yep, this is my box, I'm not stepping outside of the box. And that could be a problem. I'm going to call this a sesquare because as you had saw when I showed the list of aspects, it was called a sesquare instead of sesquiquant. I'm so sorry with these names. So the basic way to think about this is a square and a half. Now if you remember, a square is a challenging aspect. Two planets are unable to see eye to eye with each other. And then a semi-square, which was a half a square, is, yeah, we're having problems getting along with each other, but I'm able to see a common ground with you. Well, here, in a sesquare, that's basically like a semi-square, except now instead of being closer together, you guys are farther apart from each other, but you're still able to see eye to eye. It's just your energies may be farther apart from each other, so it might be less intense than a semi-square, because a semi-square is like right here, and this is where a sesquare is. So which is more powerful, this or this? And that's the way to think about it. So it's basically the same premise of a semi-square. If you ever overcome this challenge, you will appreciate it, and you will not make the same challenge and make the same mistake again, because you could probably fall into the same trap, because after all, the only reason why you're able to overcome the challenge is because you're able to see eye to eye with a planet. So you could get stuck again in that sense, because you might not notice the patterns at first, but then once it starts manifesting itself again, you're just like, wait, this feels familiar. I've done this before. And you're just like, oh, this is like a semi-square. I've overcome this challenge before. It's like being in a abusive relationship and you're knowing the signs of abuse, and then when you get into another relationship and you start seeing those signs, you're just like, whoa. No, man, I am not making these mistakes again. Where with a square, it's so hard to see the signs that you're going to make the same mistake again, and you're going to stay there until you're able to overcome it. And then before even getting into the relationship, you'll be able to see it a mile away. You'll just be like, oh, I could just tell from the energy you give off that you're going to be that it's going to be an abusive relationship. I don't even have to get close enough to you to understand that that's what a square is. So that's how it separates from a semi-square. Then we have a biquintile, which is almost like, well, as we talked about, a quintile is almost having a problem with a square, but you're able to stop it and prevent it from just happening. So a biquintile is basically you just came from a challenge and you've grown from that challenge, and how you choose to grow from that challenge will be how you shine. So it's like going back to the abuser situation. You left a relationship, and now you're just like, how do I choose to carry myself? Do I choose to carry the fact that I've been wounded and came from an abusive relationship, or do I choose to show that this abusive relationship hasn't broken me and I'm still the same person? I might be a little different, but you don't see it. So it's kind of almost weirdly enough, it is almost like a a quintile. A quintile is how you choose to show off your flair. So a biquintile is just how you choose to show your flair in a different way again. I know these aspects. It's that's why they don't really go into the minor aspects so much, because it's basically the major aspects, but just less. But the less has such significant impact because they're like the milestones, whereas the major aspects are achievements. No, your major aspects are like the milestones of your life, and then the minor aspects are like the small achievements you make throughout that. So therefore it's going to show similar patterns, because before making such a big jump, you have to have smaller little jumps that you have to make, because you have to grow into something rather than just leaping. So that's why we have these, that's why it's kind of important to go over the minor aspects. Whew, man. Second to last aspect, as they call it, a quincunx or an inconjunct. And what does an inconjunct mean? Well, we all know about a conjunction. That's when they're like this. So an inconjunct means it's actually even worse than a square if you think about it. Because a square, they have a challenge with each other, but they can overcome the challenge. With an inconjunct, we can't see eye to eye, and we create problems for each other, but it's just like, whatever. It doesn't affect me. It affects you, but not me. I'm living my life. And the other planet's just like, well, whatever you're doing, I'm not going to let it affect me. I'm going to keep living my life, so you take that energy back. So it's like a ping pong of energy, and nothing's really getting done, because these two planets are just like la-di-da-di-da, doing my own thing and interacting. It's like basically, I draw. It's if you think about it, and think about Hansel and Gretel dropping food as they go along the trail. Well, if Hansel and Gretel decide to split up and go their own way, one of them takes the basket and the other one doesn't have a basket then, so therefore your action just affected the other one, but you don't care. So now she has to figure out how to go about it her own way. Maybe Gretel was like, hey, I didn't want to use bread. That's why we're separating. I wanted to go about it a different way. So they're just like, all right, bye, see you. That's basically what this is. And it's the aspect next to an opposition, because what makes an opposition different from an inconjunct is that an opposition is two planets that have the same goal in mind. They just don't know how to achieve it because they want to go about it differently. Here, there's no common goal. We don't want to achieve anything. We're just doing. And just doing is never good, because you have to think about it, how that affects everybody else. So really, I feel like instead of being a minor aspect, this should be a major aspect. But it's a minor aspect because everything else is prioritized before this. So it's basically like, yeah, I know my faucet's leaking. I don't want to deal with it, so I'll come back to it later. Then you come back to it later. You're just like, oh, wow, now my floor's flooding. Yeah, I don't want to deal with that one now. That's too much. Come back to that later. Next thing you know, your entire house is flooding. You're just like, maybe I should call somebody about this. This problem's getting pretty big. And then you're just like, oh wow, look at that. Somebody just invited me over to their house for a party. Yeah, I'm gonna go to that instead. Who cares? That's all I got. That's basically the problem. And that's why I think it should be a major aspect. But whatever. And then we have an opposition, which is which is the last aspect to have. And it, as I said, two planets that want to be, it's conjunction, right? Now they're like separated, but guess what? They're still like on the same train of thought. It's just polar opposites. We're just thinking differently. You got one way you want to get it. There's one way I want to get it. We both want to get the same thing, but we might get in each other's way. But we can overcome this though, because we share the common goal. You see the theme with these challenges? See how these negative aspects are, we have a problem, we share an idea, or we share a way of acting, and we can get along in that way. So maybe we're able to overcome this problem differently. Whereas a square is just kind of like, and an inconjunct, it's kind of like, we got this problem. We don't think the same. We don't behave the same. So how are we going to overcome this? Well, all the other aspects are just like, yeah, maybe we don't behave the same, but yeah, I got your way of thinking. I could go with that. Or I don't really like the way you're thinking, but the way you're behaving, I could get that. I understand that part. So that's where all these different type of aspects come in. So yeah, this aspect involves self-awareness, of course, because you have two extreme opposites, and these opposites have to find a compromise, and you can only compromise if you're aware. So you're probably looking at all those pictures and you're just like, well, how do I know where they are? Well, don't worry. Your natal chart will show pictures for you. That's why you have these symbols. As you see right here, this represents your semi-square. This represents your trine. This is your opposition, your square. And as you see, you have your planets listed in descent from, it's not in any particular order. They just start with the sun and moon, which is your luminaries, the two most important. And then they start from Mercury because that's communication. And then the planets basically follow out how they are from the zodiac. Not the zodiac, basically how they are in the solar system. Because after Venus, minus the Earth's in the middle, it goes Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, yeah. And then I didn't want to break that down. I just wanted to run that over real quick because that's not really important. And then also when you look here, you have, to go talk about some previous stuff that I talked about earlier, you have your three modes, which is your cardinal, fixed, mutable. This tells you where the planets are based off of the zodiac signs. And based off of the zodiac signs, you will see how these aspects interact with each other, because I will put in a chart right here at the very end, when I'm talking and saying my goodbyes, I will show you that, as I said, these houses are fixed. So if houses are fixed, then these positions, you can always guarantee they're going to be in certain ways. It's not going to be as random as you think. It might appear that way because the zodiac signs are moving. So therefore, what might be looking like this here might look like it this way because the elements have moved. So therefore, the energies have shifted. And that's why this chart is very important, because you're able to look at where, okay, for example, so you understand how to read this. The sun and moon are forming a sextile to each other. You see in the next page. I took a snapshot of Walt Disney. Why Walt Disney? I just wanted to choose somebody that wasn't relevant. So I chose somebody that was dead, but also had a major impact, and I was pretty sure everyone knew because Disney Channel. So we have the sun and moon forming at a sextile with each other. So you're just like, what is a sextile? Well, that means that they are 60 degrees apart from each other. So that means they're two zodiac signs away from each other. So then you go over here. Sagittarius is where the sun is, and the moon is in Libra. And as you see, moon is 9 degrees, sun is 12 degrees. So that means if it was an exact, if it was like exact, it would be 12 degrees sun, 12 degrees moon, or 9 degrees moon, 9 degrees sun. But the degrees of orbs allows for 8 to 10 numbers past that. So therefore, they're only 3 degrees or 3 orbs away from each other, so therefore they're able to form this aspect to each other, and that's why they're forming a sextile. And the sextile is between Sagittarius and Libra. Sagittarius is an air sign, Sagittarius is a fire sign, and Libra is an air sign. Those two signs are complementary to each other, so that's why we're forming a sextile. But also, in the zodiac sign, you have Sagittarius, Scorpio, Libra. So therefore, as you see, 1 zodiac sign, 2 zodiac signs, now we're at the 3rd zodiac sign. So what does that mean? We were at 0 degrees, 30 degrees, now we're at a full zodiac sign, 60 degrees, now we're at a full 2 zodiac signs away from each other. So that is how you're able to interpret this zodiac signs, as well as I said, zodiac signs give you your aspects and your modes, but also you're able to tell the elements right here. Fire for F, air for A for air, E for earth, W for water. And this tells you, so for example, the sun is in Sagittarius, so Sagittarius is a fire sign, and it's also mutable, so that's why you see the sun here. And Libra is a cardinal air sign because it starts fall, and Sagittarius ends fall, so that's how you're able to see that they're different from each other. So to be able to see that in a big perspective, to really visualize this, yeah, I know I chose, because the next part I'm going to talk about is aspects, so I wanted a chart that had a good picture of what an aspect pattern looks like. And as you see this big red triangle, actually it's this big red triangle right here, that's an aspect pattern. And there's also patterns in the birth chart, which means how far apart are your planets scattered throughout the birth chart. Are they congested? Are they spread out? Are they to one side? Are they above or below the horizon? That's also what you have to take into consideration as well. That doesn't have to do with aspects. That could be a separate video, and it is going to be a separate video. I'm going to talk about that after I talk about aspect patterns, because those are patterns in the chart, so those are 2 types of patterns. But as you see, 30 degrees, well, really, since Sagittarius is the start, it's really 0 degrees, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, therefore we're forming a sextile. So another way to see that, the moon and Neptune are forming a square to each other. That's this red aspect. And a square is 90 degrees from each other. So if we start from Libra, that's 0, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, we're forming a square. See, this is how you're able to tell the general pattern. Where's another aspect I could show you guys? Right here, I will show, let's see we'll figure this one out together, because this is a dotted green line. This means it's a minor aspect. So I will be able to tell from this. So we're right here, 0 degrees Cancer, because we're on the cusp. So we're going to start at Cancer, so that's 0 degrees, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees. After 90, we're at 120, 120, we're at 150. So therefore, we're at an inconjunct, which is 150 degrees apart from each other. So Venus and Neptune just do not have anything to do with each other, which makes sense because Venus is almost in Capricorn, and Capricorn is directly opposite of Cancer. So therefore, I just showed you briefly how you're able to interpret the aspects, both by reading the chart that's provided at the very bottom or on the side, depending on what website you're using, but also on how to interpret it by looking at the chart without having to look at these. And if you just know how to count the birth chart, you're able to navigate and tell what aspects are which is very important, because if you weren't given this kind of information, you were just given the chart, you can be able to break it down So thank you guys. I will see you guys a little later with that. Oh, picture right here, because as I broke down for you guys how to visualize the chart and count, but there's an actual chart that gives you everything you need to know about how to tell what aspects are depending on zodiac signs, because as I said, the houses move, so therefore you have to go based off of the zodiac signs because those are what's moving, and aspects are all about movement. So therefore you have to be looking at what's moving and what's not stationary, which is why it's important to so then you're probably wondering, then what's so important about the houses? Well, the houses just tell you what area of life these planets are showing up in your life, basically. So that's why these aspects are so important. One square can be a different challenging in your life, like maybe you have a challenge in love and have a challenge in health. Well, those are two different houses, but they're two challenging aspects. And therefore, that's how you're able to understand how aspects play into your life. So hopefully this chart makes sense, and hopefully you can break down your chart a bit and review this PowerPoint, because talking about it, it is really hard to explain the difference. I should have probably just stuck with the major aspects, because really minor aspects are just one level down. And if you think about it in tarot, you have the major arcana and the minor arcana. Well, the major arcana are like the major aspects. These are the things that are most important in your life, while the minor arcana are just like everyday things in your life. And yeah, they can have temporary problems, but they're not like permanent like major aspects or major arcanas. So that also shows you a little bit how you can interpret both astrology and tarot. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we are not wrapping up. We still have a few more videos to go until we're finished astrology, and then your baby astrologers. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? It took me a year to get here, guys. So don't worry if this is not making sense right now. It takes a lot of time to digest. A year ago, literally, I could not verbalize anything. I could read it and type it and do all this for you guys, but if you try to ask me to explain it more than what I just typed, I'd be like, what I typed is what I know. Now I'm able to type, explain, and come up with examples, and that shows a deeper understanding. So hopefully you guys are able to understand what I'm learning, and so this helps you learn. And if you already know about these things and you just were looking for a more in-depth analysis, I hoped I taught you something new, or reinforced something, or clarified something that was confusing. So I will see you guys later. Bye!